The views expressed on the Final Straw Radio do not necessarily reflect those of Asheville FM, WSFM-LP, Friends of Community Radio, or the other affiliate stations airing this program. You're listening to WSFM-LP 103.3 in Asheville, North Carolina. This is the Final Straw, and I'm Brissa Goodness. The show can also be heard on KWTF in Bodega Bay, California, KWRKLP in Fairbanks, Alaska, KOWALP in Olympia, Washington, WCRS in Columbus, Ohio, and beginning on May 1st, 2017, WRIR in Richmond, Virginia. Woo! Archives of the show can be found at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and radio versions can be found in our collection on archive.org. If you want to hear us up on your local airwaves, contact us and we'll try to make it happen. Our show is free to download and syndicate. You can contact us with questions and suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. Please rate us on iTunes, and you can write us letters at The Final Straw Radio, care of Asheville FM, 864 Haywood Road, Asheville, North Carolina, 28806. All the things. This program is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned cooperative in Asheville specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. Firestorm's partial catalog of books and zines can be found online at firestorm.coop.
This episode features two portions. In the first segment, we talked to Noelle about the case of Janye Waller. Janye is a young black revolutionary from Oakland, California, who was convicted of property destruction during the 2014 demonstrations in the Bay following the non-acquittal of Officer Darren Wilson for the murder of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Noelle is a supporter of Janye Waller and believes that Janye's conviction was a clear case of railroading and radical profiling against a community activist. Janye is now finishing up a 2-year sentence with 1 year off for good behavior. The interview was held in February of 2017, and Janye is set to be released in coming months. Then he's out on parole. You can find out more about this case and donate to his post-release fund at rally.org/support-Janye, which is Janye. And in the second segment, I speak with Noah, who is a well-established movement medic, anarchist, and participant in Standing Rock, about his experiences there and analyses of how this resistance was organized and how it developed. This interview was recorded days before media saw the images of the camps at Sacred Stones burning and having been disbanded, so many of the modes and tenses that we employ are not what we might have given the current position of the camps. We talk about a wide-ranging set of topics, from what worked in the camps to what the failings were, and how resistance to extraction industries could look moving forward. Welcome to the longer, extended podcast version of this interview, in which there is some minor expletives that we did not explete out. So there's that. For links on how to support the efforts at Standing Rock, which are ongoing, and support is needed both for folks' legal and medical expenses, you can visit our blog, where we will post those websites. For those of you listening in Asheville and are interested in the Asheville Anarchist Book Fair, we are ending our call for all submissions on April 1st of this year. Check out acab2017.noblogs.org to get involved. But first, here are some words from anarchist prisoner Sean Swain.
What you say, what you say, what you say, what? We'll call like a fly!
You know, as anarchists, we have to find a way to be more imaginative when developing methods for conflict resolution. If we don't, we're never going to survive the impending atrumpolis. It seems to me that despite our superior sense of ourselves, when it comes to conflict resolution, we often act just like poor deluded hierarchs. I'd like to provide a few anecdotal examples from the experiences of friends of mine whose names have been changed to protect radio executives. First, the experience of Jim. Jim was involved in anti-racist action and decided to infiltrate a Nazi group. The FBI found out Jim was inside the group and sought his cooperation. Jim struggled with it, as on one hand he could really strike a blow against the Nazis by helping the FBI, but on the other, it would be at the expense of cooperating with the fascist state. One of Jim's friends shared that situation with others, and in no time Jim was publicly denounced all over the web as an FBI snitch by fellow anarchists who didn't allow Jim to resolve his own situation before ostracizing him and snitch-jacketing him. I would suggest that public humiliation and accusatory hysteria should not be part of our conflict resolution process. That feels very hierarchic to me. Second experience. Bill was accused of what amounted to rape by a former love interest after they essentially broke up. The accusation was amended and qualified through the course of time until Bill was accused of having greater influence and asymmetrical power in his relationships, which then created a dynamic where, while the sex was consensual, that consent was mitigated by the fact that Bill's influence was so great. In other words, Bill was a big personality and he possessed charisma. So, when the relationship was over and his former partner, knowing Bill differently at the end of the relationship than at the beginning, had regrets about the consensual events that already happened, and that was Bill's fault. In this case, anarchist friends ganged up on Bill and interrogated him before an ad hoc grand jury, although they didn't call it that. Then they put Bill on trial, but used a different word. The prosecutor, who didn't call himself a prosecutor, presented the case against Bill, and then the gathered anarchists formed a jury, but didn't call it that, and they deliberated as to Bill's guilt and his sentence, though not in those words. In the end, anarchists imposed upon another anarchist a whole host of demands under the threat of exiling him. As someone who has been put on trial by delusional hierarchs, I would suggest that we shouldn't do that. Apart from the offense, whatever it might be, and regardless of the imposed sentence by another name, whatever it might be, such processes do nothing to help the so-called offender to develop a new way of thinking and acting. The whole thing is just fraught with creating new trauma for everyone involved without any real resolution. As a last example, Kathy was elected to a position in an anarcho-syndicalist organization of significant reputation. Kathy worked with prisoners in combating the evils of the prison complex and publicizing the atrocities. Kathy didn't just expose abuses of prisoners who are anarchists, but included the experiences of prisoners and former prisoners whose own politics might not be in line with ours. But even racist prisoners and homophobic prisoners and misogynist prisoners are prisoners. Kathy has since been drummed out of the position she was elected to, a position she was singularly equipped to perform. Because her inclusion of a racist prisoner's experience of abuse by the state somehow makes Kathy a Nazi sympathizer rather than a prisoner sympathizer, which it is her job to be. So in this instance, the conflict resolution model employed by anarchists is to fling poop at another anarchist and then fire her and ignore the electoral decision that was made by the larger group of anarchists. If we're going to do all of that, what distinguishes us from the wackadoodles in 2000 with dangling chads, or this current fraudulent with an orange face and bad comb-over who didn't win the popular vote? It seems to me that we have to be very careful in first deciding what conformity we require of other anarchists, whether it involves their conduct or their ideological orientation. In that, we have to determine what exactly other anarchists owe us and what authority we possess to demand conformity to some ideal we seek to impose. We certainly each have a responsibility to prevent rape and assault of anarchists, even by other anarchists, and we have a reasonable expectation that other anarchists will refrain from oppressive conduct. But how much ideological purity can we demand of others? And what kind of authority can we exercise, individually and collectively, to address the conduct of others? How far can we go in the exercise of even a collective resolution against an anarchist who has somehow offended our sense of propriety, before we ourselves cease to be anarchists and become, instead, the oppressor, the ad hoc state imposing its dictatorial rule upon an anarchist freethinker? It's not an easy thing to demand conformity from another anarchist and still be able to square that with our own identification as anarchists ourselves. We certainly cannot do it while continuing to resort to the same conflict resolution processes employed by unimaginative, deluded hierarchs. This is anarchist prisoner Sean Swain from Warren Correctional Institution in Lebanon, Ohio. If you're listening, you are the resistance.
You can write to Sean Swain at SeanSwain, 243-205, Warren CI, P.O. Box 120, 5787 State Route 63, Lebanon, Ohio, 45036. Updates on his situation and more writings by Sean can be found at seanswain.org.
I'm speaking with a supporter of Janye Waller, a young black revolutionary from the SF Bay Area who's currently incarcerated. This is Noel. Thanks a lot for taking the time to chat. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Noel, can you tell listeners about who Janye is? Before his incarceration, what sort of activism and projects was he engaged with in 2014?
Sure. Janye and I met at Quilombo, where we both volunteer at a community center. Quilombo is in West Oakland in California, and it is an autonomous zone. So it's not governed by anybody but the people. The police aren't allowed on the property, and our main goal is to create a permaculture/counterculture to what we see today in white supremacist society. We're teaching people how to grow their own food, how to take care of themselves, make their own clothing, and also spend a lot of time giving back to the community, which includes needle exchanges, Sunday breakfasts, where we cook breakfast every Sunday. We've been doing that for the last 3 years. And also what's new is the language share, which we have people teaching Kiswahili so we can learn our indigenous languages together. And also the Q meals, which are hot meals we serve Tuesday and Thursday.
That's awesome.
Janye has been very proactive in being a leader or somewhat of a role model for Black youth in the Bay Area, especially being involved with community organizing.
Can you talk about the neighborhood where Colombo is situated and what the demographics are and like the class and what threats like gentrification poses to the neighborhood? Cool.
So Quilombo is very active in anti-gentrification projects. Both Janye and I lost housing due to gentrification this exact same month last year, 2016. We were evicted from our home in West Oakland because our landlord pushed us out. And when I say pushed us out, he literally pushed us out and lied to us and did all the little dirty slumlord tricks to get us to leave the property. And we really haven't found housing since. Gentrification has become an extreme issue in the Bay Area where folks who have lived here all their lives are now finding themselves close to the streets, the same people that we feed and help clothe with our free store at Quilombo. Yeah, it's really sad. West Oakland has always been kind of rowdy, a little rough. There's a lot of drug abuse in this neighborhood, and it's really interesting to see the folks who move out here. They're not affected by poverty at all. Meanwhile, we're still suffering, and other people are, jogging, walking their dogs, and getting coffee from the new little brew house on the corner that used to be, a gym or a place where Black people would go to spend time together. There's other centers like Quilombo, not as active, but you just don't see a lot of that anymore.
So can you talk about Janye's arrest and case and conviction?
Oh, man, this is an interesting story. So in 2014, the non-indictments of the police officers who had shot and killed Mike Brown and the police officer who put the chokehold on Eric Garner started riots throughout the whole nation, I feel. At that time, the spirit and the energy was really strong, and I think that everyone was on the same page of we're not going to take this anymore. And there was a lot of talk about who's organizing this, who's organizing that when it comes to direct action, which is something that we all get involved with at those times to step up and make a demonstration or rally people, the masses, to, kind of come together and see what we can do to change things for our neighborhoods and our community. He was involved with the march, but because of his community organizing, he was singled out as some sort of ringleader of looting or rioting. They basically were trying to find somebody to pin all that stuff that was going on. In 2015, August 2015, Janye was arrested on a racial profiling case. Him, along with two other of my brothers from Quilombo and a sister of mine, were arrested for the same thing. They all fit the same profile of the profile of somebody who got robbed of a cell phone in Berkeley. And they all fit the description. That's what the cops said. They fit the description. So we're talking about 3 different black men who look completely different and 1 black woman who all fit one description of one person who had took a cell phone in Berkeley. If you look online, you might be able to find the video because I posted it, but it was a big scene, and it was really horrific to hear my sister scream at the top of her lungs while you can literally see them being attacked, tackled to the ground, and seeing officers' knees go into their neck, all over a alleged cell phone robbery. So after they had arrested them, the officers did not properly book them into the jail. Instead, they handcuffed them, threw them in the car, in the paddy wagon, separate cars, took them around Berkeley, blindfolded them, and had random people try to identify them as the perpetrators. So what ended up happening is the police officers had the man whose cell phone was taken identify, and ironically, the dude who had got robbed of his cell phone actually went to school with Janye in Berkeley, and he automatically said it was not him. Janye and my brother and my sister were still taken to jail. They were still booked, even though the person who said that their phone had been taken said none of them had did it or had anything to do with it. Once they were in jail, the rest of our comrades were working on getting them free. My brother and my sister were easy to get out, but for whatever reason, they wanted to hold on to Janye. We did not know yet. We had bailed him out. I talked to him on the phone and let him know that we had bailed him out, and he had informed us that they said they weren't going to let him go, and they were using police terror tactics to scare him and put him and asking him questions about stuff that had nothing to do with what he was arrested about. So if we bail him out and then they're telling him, oh, there's no way you're going home until you sign a paper that's saying you were at a march in 2014 due to these events that happened at the march, and they want to pin it on him, it just seems a little weird and unorthodox. But that's how the police roll. They'll do whatever and say whatever to scare you into incriminating yourself, damn near. They held him for a few days before they released him, but not before he signed something that placed him at that march, which gave them enough ammo to actually press charges on this 9 months investigation on Janye, because they had been building up this case around him, making him the center of it, releasing his name to the public as and identifying him as the perp without the trial, without even pressing charges. So as soon as they got that piece of evidence, they so-called claim, they ran with it. And that's what the beginning of Janye's case looked like. Straight like that.
That sucks.
It's crazy. Like, it's really crazy. And if they could, they would throw the book at him, just for even having the nerve to try to take it to trial. They told him, the DA told him that they would give him 10 years. Janye was initially charged with 3 different charges: assault with a deadly weapon, grave bodily injury, and
a robbery charge?
Commercial burglary, yeah. And they ended up, after rallying people up and going through the year-long case, almost 1 year, he ended up taking the deal. And you see that a lot in these types of cases where we didn't feel like Janye should do any time at all. He didn't do anything wrong. They said that the dude who did it was black. He had locks, but that's not enough. That's not enough to incriminate somebody that's so involved in helping people and loving people and caring for people. It's not enough to take him away from his friends and his family and the family that he has to support, because there's no one else that will. It's not enough to steal opportunities away from a young black man that's trying to do right in life and trying to get ahead. He could be really doing wrong, but the fact of the matter is he's not, and he doesn't. So he's doing time right now that is not deserved, and it's really up.
So Janye was going to Berkeley Community College, right, and studying accounting at the time?
Yes, he's really good with math, and he's really good with numbers.
And was also, like you said, supporting his family, like his siblings and his mom, right? Like working and bringing back the money.
Yeah, because his mom gets sick, and she's not able to work like that. His brothers are too young, so it's really just Janye, and his father's not around, so he's the head of the household.
And so how long has he been in so far, and what's his sentence?
You said how long has he been in so far, and what's his sentence?
Yeah.
He's been gone for 10 months now. He has 2 months left. He was sentenced with 2 years and 50%. Well, that's his deal. He wasn't necessarily sentenced. We didn't have a trial or anything. We went through the preliminary hearing and everything. But, they kept throwing offers. Their first offer was 5 years. Their next was 2. And, we look at these type of things and we're like, well, if you guys really feel like he's guilty, then why all of the deals, right? Like, why are all the different opportunities to not get to trial? It makes you think that, they really don't have anything to carry. But another thing that you think even more about is, if I take the chance to fight this, and it's my word against the ideas and ideals and morals of a grand jury, which is not the jury of your peers, but ex-prosecutors and men of law in suits that really have never experienced anything that you're currently going through, to throw you a bone and give you an ear and really hear out what's going on with the police system, the system in general. Berkeley police is the worst police county, I feel like, in the Bay Area. They literally attack black people and single them out. And I've worked in Berkeley, and I've been in Berkeley, and it's always been the same thing with their police officers. The police officers that harass Janye on a daily basis are the same ones that harassed him when he was going to Berkeley High in high school. So to stand in front of the court and plead your case about how the police act and how they use certain tactics to mess with you, and you're getting harassed on a daily basis, and to hope that they'll hear your word over whatever the DA has to say about you, from history's record, your chances are very, very slim.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when those prosecutors and the people that are on that grand jury or the pigs that are on the grand jury are used to working with the police, and it's all such a closed circuit and such a closed system.
Yeah.
So he's got 2 months left. Is he still being kept at Santa Rita jail?
No, Janye was never supposed to be at Santa Rita jail. Part of his so-called deal was that he would be going to prison for 2 years with 50%, so a total of 1 year with good behavior, and if not, he would do his remainder year. He was in Rita for 2 months. Then they transferred him to Quentin, which is a prison, level 4 prison in the Bay Area. He was there for 3 months through his reception. And reception is basically, the lobby room for criminals. So he got to spend time with the real murderers, the real killers, the real rapists. They're all waiting to get sorted into their specific areas. But Janye, his case was not that serious, so he never was supposed to be there. He just had to do time there. And after that, they moved him to where he's at now in Susanville, which is a level 2 prison. It's not as bad as Quentin, but there's still a lot of violence. When I talk to him, which is often, or as often as he can, he lets me know, there are race riots. There are people that are getting stabbed in the prison that he's at. There are people that go there and are not coming back home. He has 2 months left, and, a lot of inmates, they don't like that. They don't like to see other people go when they have years on top of years on top of years. The COs, they don't like to see you go. They like to do things to make you finish out the remainder of your full sentence. It's a very hostile, volatile, negative environment, and he doesn't deserve to be there. That he shouldn't be there. He doesn't have any place there at all.
So there's a rally.org site for Janye's fundraising, and is this like going to go toward post-release support or into his commissary, or a mixture of the two, or to help his family since he's been away and hasn't been able to contribute towards the daily income?
Yes, we do want to raise money for Janye's family. We also want to raise money for his rehabilitation. When you come out of prison, there's really no resources or real help out there for you after you come home. Our hopes was to find Janye a place to stay when he gets out so he wouldn't have to go to a halfway house, which is most likely going to happen when you get parole. These are the type of things they do to keep you on paperwork, to keep you on lock. That's how the system works. But we do want to have something for him when he comes home. The rally page that we started, we've gotten a lot of support. And so through this last year, and shout out to all the supporters because y'all are awesome, he has been okay and been able to eat and been able to get the things that he needs. And we're very grateful for that. And we will be even more grateful if we have something to give him when he comes home because, yes, finding work is going to be extremely difficult. That the part of his deal was that he was going to get a strike. Janye just made 22. He's never been arrested before. I mean, not sentenced and arrested, detained, and harassed, yes, but nothing like, he has no record. So for him to this be his first real offense and he already has a strike, you can see what type of system we're up against. They want to see him again. They want him to get his second strike the second year he's free. These are the plans that we already know they have set out for our black men. So, yeah, we want to set him up to where he'll be okay for a little bit when he comes home, or, the biggest of his worries have already been behind him. And that's definitely something that we want to fundraise and rally for. Absolutely.
Is there a way for you to text me his address and I can put it in with the interview so that if folks want to write him in the meantime, they can do that?
Yep, of course.
Cool. Oh, do you want to say it out loud?
I got all his letters here. Hold on. Okay. So Janye's address is, you could write him at Janye Waller. His CDC number is B as in boy, A as in apple, 2719. So BA 2719. And he is at the California Correction Center in Susanville, California, at Facility A, P.O. Box 2400. and that's zip code 96127.
Definitely, like you said, like super important, especially especially considering all the things that Janye is going to be facing, like in this next period of time, right before release, and then upon release, considering all the, all the ways that society set up against him in the first place, but also having that strike on his, if he's applying for a job, if he's applying for housing, any of those circumstances, it's really important that Janye get the support now and a continued support for a bit. If folks are going to be writing Janye a letter, like what kind of stuff, like what's Janye's personality, other than being a very giving person and supporting family, what does Janye like talking about? What does Janye like reading?
Janye loves reading revolutionary books. I think he's reading Blood in My Eyes right now. He likes revolutionary novels. He likes reading about history. He likes fiction. Janye has a great sense of humor, and he just loves to laugh. He has a really funny personality. He likes to bring people's spirits up. That's totally Janye.
That's awesome. I also see on this post on the Rally site that he was reading Octavia Butler, China Miéville, Rich Shapiro, Sam Delaney, which I think is awesome. Sam Delaney's an awesome author. That's so cool.
Yes, Janye, he loves to read. He's also really, really amazing at skateboarding. He was sponsored at a time. He's always had a good head on his shoulders. He's always, tried to be himself and do the right thing. He's not what the system would like to make him out to be or put him in a box to be. It's just so unfortunate, but it is what it is. I'm just glad that it's 1 year and not 10.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the folks in Berkeley and Oakland are really lucky to have Janye out there organizing in the community, and you too.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I guess just to show love and show support. Janye loves getting mail. He told me he got mail from people in Australia, and I think that's really cool.
That's awesome.
I think that's super dope that people, would take that time and just, say what's up to him. It's really an isolating, lonely place being in jail, and it does something to your mind so crucial. You can spend a year in jail, come out, and literally be officially crazy. Like, you can apply for SSI and all of that, because the mental effects of jail is crazy. But I want everyone to know that Janye is very strong, and he is okay, and he is very excited to come home. And I'm just glad that, he has people that are looking out for him. That's really cool, because Janye looks out for everybody else. Everybody.
Well, that's what solidarity is, right?
That's right.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for chatting, Noelle. And
awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Because we really want, something for Janye when he comes home. Like, that's super, super important. I don't want him to come home and he just froze. None of his clothes fit him. He done gained 70 pounds. I'm like, oh, my God.
He gained 70 pounds? Like, he's been working out that much? Or
he's been working out and eating like crazy. He has a job in the kitchen, and so he gets to eat extra food and stuff. But, yeah, he is not skinny anymore.
Yeah, I've just seen the pictures, and he seems like a pretty svelte dude. Like, not small, but just like trim. Right.
Doing all those skateboard tricks. I'm like, I wonder if you can still do those tricks when you come home. You gonna break a board or what?
Yeah, right. Wow. Cool.
Yeah, I just don't want him to feel like, oh, woe is me. What is this world? I just came out of here and I'm out here and I don't have nothing, never have nothing. It's just the suckiest feeling. I just want him to be like, okay, I'm really free and, I can breathe a little bit. Mm-hmm. He's definitely ready to work. He's ready to get into contracting, start trying to build some houses. We've been talking about building homes for people. And he's really good with his hands. He loves working with his hands. And he's young, so, he has time to figure stuff out, but in this day and age, in this type of, like, political climate, you don't really have that privilege. You don't really have that luxury of just, I'm going to go to school and figure it out. It's like, can you go to school? Can you go to college? Can you go to work without, it being conflict and issue? Yeah, it's going to be difficult when you come back. But I believe that, there's people out there that's going to look out and understand and, really, really show some love. He needs it.
One amazing thing about about the way that like political discourse has been going in the last few years is such a focus on incarceration and the impacts on individual, like all the like ban the boxes movements in different states, and just documentaries like 13 coming out, and New Jim Crow just like continuing to spread further and further. People are more aware than they have been in a really long time. The folks who aren't necessarily the focus of like mass incarceration as it stands. So I don't know. Hopefully, knock on wood, that'll make it a little easier of a situation on Janye when he gets out.
Right. Hopefully. I know this gentrification crisis ain't dying out anytime soon.
Yeah.
When we got evicted from our home last year, we were sleeping in my car for the months leading up to him going inside and him accepting the deal and going inside. And since then, I have yet to be able to procure or like secure housing, and that was like my 1 year goal. That was like my only goal while he was gone was, I'm going to find a place for us and something for him to come home to. And it's literally that difficult. Not that I haven't been on my shit, not that I haven't been making money, but, by record, by name, by government name, right? You don't know me, you haven't seen me, you haven't met me, but you see all the things attached to my name, and so it's like I'm already out before I even got a foot in, just based off that. And so, Janye being just a fresh 22 and him coming home and he has a strike and this and that, it's like they're not going to care about what a good person he is. They're not going to care about what he does for the community. They're not even going to ask those questions aren't even on the application.
Yeah. They're not going to be asking, like, is this person going to be good for the neighborhood? Are they going to be contributing? Are they going to be helping folks out and being a good neighbor? It's not the logic of the market.
Yeah, right. What it should be, but definitely not what it is.
Well, it sounds like the work y'all are doing is getting towards that end. So.
Yeah. And we're going to keep fighting the good fight.
You're listening to The Final Straw Radio, and I'm William Goodenough on 103.3 FM on WSFM LP in Asheville, North Carolina. Here is our interview with Noah about Standing Rock. Thanks for coming on to The Final Straw, talking about this issue. So we're here to talk about Standing Rock, and I'm sure that folks have heard about it if they have been keeping at least half an eye on the news. But for those who haven't, would you mind giving a brief overview of what the struggle is and what has been happening there?
Sure. So the Dakota Access Pipeline is a large pipeline that would carry heavy bitumen Bakken crude to refineries in Illinois before it getting sent out of the country for foreign consumption. The pipeline is routed to pass just upstream from the Standing Rock Reservation's water intake, which is part of their concern, as well as the pipeline route has gone through a number of sacred sites, causing the desecration of burial sites and other old religious sites. Back in August, when construction got close to the Missouri River crossing by the Standing Rock Reservation, the Sacred Stone Camp, which had been in existence since April, had made a bigger call for support, in which many folks responded, and that's when the first arrest took place in mid-August, led largely by women and youth from Standing Rock and other indigenous women and youth. including some very strong images of women running out onto the Cannonball Ranch to block construction equipment back in August, which was some of the first real civil disobedience, as well as the horse nations coming to just be presented to the law enforcement that was there, but the law enforcement ended up being scared by the presentation of the horse nations, and so kind of backed off and kind of fled, and was some very strong imaging right off the bat there. I arrived not long after that and helped provide medical support for some of the nonviolent civil disobedience and just in camp at large based out of the Red Warrior Camp, which, Red Warrior Camp was one of the few organizations that really took a strong lead in actual civil disobedience that stopped pipeline construction. Were it not for the Red Warrior Camp, Indigenous Peoples Power Project, and some of the crews from some of the other Lakota bands and other nations really stepping up and taking that direct action to the pipeline construction, that pipeline be said and done by now. And we certainly wouldn't have cost Dakota Access, the millions upon millions of dollars we've cost them in lost time, violated contracts, and stock price, as well as the divestments from the banks, which with Seattle's and some native reservations like the Kickapoo tribe have totaled well over $3 billion of money withdrawn from Wells Fargo in punitive response by people. So the divestment is going to leave a lasting mark, I think, on these banks' psyches and their shareholders' psyches when they think about funding more of these projects.
Absolutely, and it seems like along with the actions that have been taken at the various camps, which I want to touch on in a minute, the relationships between the various camps has been also very important to have outreach via social media and just awareness being spread in sort of a grassroots way, because media, mainstream media was very, very, very slow seemingly to pick up on struggles going on at Standing Rock. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to say about media blackouts there or anything like that. What has the process been for getting word out, I suppose?
Well, certainly it's been led by some grassroots media projects that have been around since the start of the Sacred Stone Camp. The folks with Unicorn Riot have been there throughout the course of much of this, which certainly is where I first started getting my media from, as they did intermittent updates on the Sacred Stone Camp from its start and through several stages of it well before Standing with Standing Rock or No DAPO became a more common phrase. I think it was also very important the way at the largest camp at the Ocheti Sakowin camp, the 7 Council Fire camp, which was kind of just an overflow camp.
Was that the youth camp?
The International Youth Council had a teepee in that camp for a while, but they were also have space at Sacred Stone Camp and the Sichangu Rosebud Camp. So, yeah, the camps can be confusing when you're there, and have been confusing while being there. It, I'm sure, is particularly challenging to try and keep sorted from afar. The Sacred Stone Camp is on LaDonna Brave Bull Allard's land and her family's land, which was started by LaDonna and some other matriarchs from the area and the youth runners back in the start of April. And it was the Dakota Youth Runners who started getting a lot of attention from the long-distance runs they did, that started gaining some of it. It also, needs to be pressed that there have been folks in that region who had been organizing in anticipation of the Keystone XL coming through Lakota territory that allowed for some of the groups within this larger mass to come together quickly and in an organized manner and show greater levels of discipline and training, because we had been training together. We, were under the leadership of Lakota matriarchs and other Lakota elders who understood from the get-go that as these pipelines were coming through, we needed to be able to have a common language around how we fight and how we resist with nonviolent civil disobedience. And so folks are familiar, folks understand that there are different roles, and if your role is embedded media for the day, or medic or police liaison, that's your role for that day, and you need to stick to it. And if that's not your role, you need to not try and make that your role. And so that's why, when the camp was significantly smaller than any of its largest, when it was, 9, 10, 12,000 people between the camps, when there was only a few hundred folks in camp, there was more effective direct action to stop the pipeline than when there were all these folks who came to stand with Standing Rock, but there was either no plans to use that mass of people effectively, or an unwillingness to utilize any of those plans on the parts of some.
Is that just because the camp got so unruly with the size, or do you feel that people were kind of not respecting any directives that were being told to them?
No, I think there was a problem, as I've seen it put on the internet, that there is a problem of peace chiefs trying to lead during a war situation. And so there were folks who, in the language I would use, didn't respect others' diversity of tactics.
Oh, gotcha.
And so there were folks who would interfere with warriors and water protectors on the front line and cause division, and even go so far as to utilize spiritual abuse and manipulation to interrupt actions that were happening, or not allow actions to happen or prevent them from happening in very vague ways, getting outside folks to go and try and scream at people. Elders said no, and what they meant was, Dave Archambault and the tribal council might not be happy with what's going on, but there are a number of different elders in that camp, because there are many nations and many bands in that camp, and not everyone listens to the same elders. Folks are taught to listen to their elders, and so not all the elders, just like the Lakota, are not a monolithic group. They disagree. Some of the grandmas and aunties would be right there telling folks to hold the line, while others would be telling them to go back to camp and pray. And I mean, to some extent, because the camp grew so fast and there wasn't space made for an all-nations council of any sort, these rifts and problems became rather challenging at times, because there is so much to do just in camp life and preparing for the change of the seasons, and to try and train and utilize huge numbers of people who are rolling over every few days, as well as deal with mountains of supplies coming in. It all became very challenging, and then you have real separation of leadership of folks who were contracted by the tribe to help, or were from larger nonprofits who largely operated out of the casino rather than the camp. And so you had that disconnect of folks who weren't in fact in the camps, but were considered leadership for one reason or another, which made things very challenging all in all. When the information about what's happening in camp gets to leadership through games of telephone, you end up with a lot of rumor and hearsay added in, or misinformation that can be seen by how often Facebook says the camp is being raided when we're not.
Yeah. As an anarchist, I feel almost single-mindedly fixated on this idea of what you were talking about a non-respect of like a diversity of tactics, and trying to like parse out where a rhetoric of nonviolence is coming from. now I would imagine that it's extremely, like, we talk a lot about, like, about how, you know, liberals have sort of co-opted the idea of nonviolence to mean or to weaponize it against, like, radical struggle, basically, or to weaponize it against as a way to take the wind out of sails of, like, radical struggle, I would say. But I would imagine that this rhetoric of nonviolence is a bit different given the, like, layers of colonization and like disenfranchisement that people are experiencing. Do you have any words about that or anything?
I mean, there's certainly real challenge for anyone who's not Lakota or Native to kind of understand the nuance and understand the history between the Indian Reorganization Act, tribal councils, versus the traditional treaty councils. And it's important, especially for outsiders, to err on the side of listening to the folks who are directly hosting them in these situations and not be overly disrespectful to local communities. Now, that doesn't mean that local community is unified in their response, and that's not really our place as outsiders to really dive right into the middle of it and stir up. I have been working with some folks who are out there for several years, and so those were the folks I took my lead from because they're traditional Lakota and Dakota matriarchs. So with that, you know, there was that division of folks who believed in the courts and believed in that being the primary route, and, you know, would at times spread disinformation about how the action of folks locking down to equipment or shutting down work sites was going to negatively impact these civil court proceedings. When, you know, if anything, they gave those civil court proceedings the time they needed to get denied, but there hasn't been a win from the courts in this battle that I'm aware of. And so if we were relying only on those means, again, the pipeline would have been built by now. The spark of the inspiration that has come out of Standing Rock wouldn't have happened were it not for folks who understand that prayers have to be met halfway. You know, we can't just pray and expect things to stop. And similarly, yeah, we have to understand robust histories. You hear this ongoing colonized myth that First Nation peoples were, you know, completely passive or pacifistic, when that's simply not true. It's a well-known fact that many nations, you know, many people were almost always armed and prepared to defend their homelands and their territory and their way of life from settler colonial populations. And part of this myth comes from those boarding schools and comes from, you know, this Western narrative that says, you know, it was the white folks who freed the slaves, and it was the white folks who were benevolent enough to give the natives, you know, these reservations and these lands to hold, rather than things like the Lakota, like, you know, slaughtered, you know, a whole division of the cavalry at the Battle of Greasy Grass and, you know, killed Custard and took that flag. And that was part of, like, writing the treaty. Red Cloud's Wars and the Big Powder Bluff were the reasons for those treaties. You know, the Northern Cheyenne, the Lakota, you know, Dakota and Nakota's fierce resistance to the U.S. incursions and these settler colonial incursions is what created these treaties. It's also what provoked the U.S. into using genocidal tactics such as slaughtering all the buffalo and stripping natives from their culture to send them to boarding school so they could rewrite those narratives and send those kids back to those cultures with this wrong narrative.
As a way of just, like, a tactic of cultural genocide, it seems, you know.
And so, I mean, with that, you have, you know, this Christian idea of forgiveness that is pressed, or understanding. And I personally hope that those cops and law enforcement, you know, come to some dawning of understanding that their ways are bad. But until that happens, I, have no sympathy for them or no forgiveness for their behaviors until they seek it. And so it's something that personally baffles me, especially coming from a medic's perspective and seeing the grievous injuries that we've seen out there. Yeah, and that folks want to negotiate with these people or work with them to get into that system. And, it's one of those things. Some folks who don't want the protectors to continue resisting are legitimately scared that those cops are going to kill one of us. Mm-hmm. And that's a very real possibility, but it also disrespects a lot of those folks' agencies who understand that they may die in this struggle.
Definitely.
And that if the state is going to go through such measures and allow their law enforcement to utilize these munitions, these so-called less than lethal munitions in reckless ways, then, yeah, they may end up killing someone. But, if they kill a water protector who's, got their hands up and are in prayer, isn't that nonviolent Gandhian King-esque nonviolence they're talking about is let them harm us to the point that the moral imperative becomes so overwhelmingly against them that they have to give up. They don't have the will to beat you any longer.
Yeah, and I mean, also in a time when we have this new president now who is actively seeking to, criminalize so-called peaceful protest, seeking any kind of legitimacy from the state, to me, doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. But what also makes a lot of sense is taking leadership from people who are most affected and also keeping in mind that that's a, non-homogeneous crew of people. It's a very complicated situation. It seems like it's very, very difficult to know where to draw the line while also maintaining, your own political integrity and all of this as well to, be a whole human being or something like this. You mentioned that you were a movement medic, and you have spoken about your experiences at Standing Rock, but I was wondering if there's anything that you wanted to add about your involvement at the camp.
Well, yeah. I mean, my involvement at the camp has, largely been as a medic in support of the water protectors. So I've both worked to help increase the medic capacity and continue to work to try and help us stay coordinated and functioning in a way that allows us to provide the best level of care that we can. Mm-hmm. I also have gone out on a number of the direct actions to support water protectors and have dealt with some injuries and ailments in folks that the volumes of which were pretty staggering at times. On November 20th, when they just kept using water cannons on folks, it both speaks to the heart and the willingness of the water protectors. By being from the medic's perspective, we saw, over 300 patients that night. Oh my God. Several folks were, severely injured. Sophie Wolonsky nearly lost her arm that night, and other folks have, it seems, lost permanent vision from that night. And the level of PTSD that is inflicted on folks in these situations, or the potential for it. At this point, the folks who have it from that night kind of have it, and the ones who don't.
Yeah.
But similarly, when the Sacred Ground Camp on the easement was raided on October 27th, they literally just lined up and whooped on folks for all day. We're seeing the Miami model played out in rural settings. Sheriff Laney from Cass County and Sheriff Kirkmeyer from Morton County, I'm sure will retire real soon and go on the law enforcement Homeland Security speaking tour, or to pop up at every pipeline fight to give advice on how to deal with these damn eco-terrorist protester types.
And there has been a lot of law enforcement there from day one, it seems, right?
Not from day one. I mean, Morton County, I think, employs like 33, 39 sheriffs totally. And, you know, the North Dakota State Police, you know, and Highway Patrol could only muster so many folks. But now, you know, law enforcement from 9 other states, federal agencies like the ATF and Border Patrol have been deployed out there. You know, there's, I believe, just north of 500 North Dakota National Guardsmen who are activated presently. So, you know, there is now quite the policing apparatus, as was on display when the last child camp was raided and shut down. You know, they had over 6 armored vehicles out that day.
Yeah. It's, you know, so interesting, you know, not interesting, I guess. Interesting is the wrong word, but like to analyze, it feels important to analyze police responses to struggles like this in order to like kind of get a psychological hold on like what the hell is going on. And we've been seeing a lot of media like recently about the struggle and many, many different approaches, like from total erasure to, you know, some pretty heartfelt support. I'm wondering what your opinions are about like how you see this struggle informing future struggles and how you see this one particularly continuing, or if it's too early to say.
Well, I mean, I think at the very least, what has happened out there in the treaty territories has brought a new level of what it looks like to be brave in the face of the state for folks. And it's behaviors that can be pointed to as strong, definitive attempts at you know, nonviolent action that, you know, we've already seen, you know, the Pinion Pipeline. There was one action out there and they canceled it. Trans-Pecos Pipeline, there have been a couple of actions already and they've shut down work. You know, Mississippi Stand went after other sections of the Dakota Access Pipeline down in Iowa. We're seeing folks starting to really resist the Sable Pipeline, the Spectra Pipeline. Lancaster, PA is starting to openly build camps and openly express how, you know, we aren't paid outside agitators. Here's the local teacher.
Yeah.
Here's the local school mom. Like, you know, these are, you know, local folks who are stepping up and being like, oh, heck no, can we do this here? And I think it's important as we do this that, you know, we need to understand there is a space for specifically prayerful things. There is a space for the paper war, or there is a space for more confrontational direct action tactics, but these are not the same space. And I think it needs to be stressed that the water protectors and warriors never like went back to the camp and were like, y'all are praying wrong. Y'all need to go pray over there. Y'all need to pray like this. Y'all need to pray like that. But that is what some of the folks who use spirituality like Christians do. They used it as a manipulation tactic. They used the spirituality much like Christians saying, you have to pray like we pray here, even to other Lakota who were taught differently. And so, you know, those cause some real tensions, and like, you know, there's some like real beef that like I can't claim to fully understand, but I know that there's like, you know, families members don't like each other over some of that stuff. Because folks called and asked for warriors to come, and then those same folks, when they saw what warriors did and what water protectors do to actually stop stuff, they got scared. Either pressure got put on them through back channels, or they realized that they would not be able to control the narrative. And so they, you know, passed a number of rules or tried to impose any number of authorities on folks to say, you can't do that this way, you can't do that way, which, certainly rubbed any number of folks the wrong way when no one could really say where these decisions were coming from.
So do you think that this is an analysis? And to be before I ask that question, I want to be really explicit about what you mean by prayer. This is like a non-Christian, explicitly.
Yeah, this was specifically Lakota spirituality. That's whose homelands we were on. We were on Lakota Treaty Territory, Lakota and Dakota lands. And, there were certainly some basic modicums asked of folks to respect, things like don't take pictures of the sacred fires, don't put stuff in the sacred fires unless you've asked permission, and gotten permission. If you have a uterus and are on your moon, stay away from ceremony, stay out of the kitchen, just some cultural norms there. And, in that big camp, there are folks from many nations praying in many different ways there. But there is some kind of manipulation of that happened that was used as a point of leverage to dishearten and disrupt some of the youth and some of the frontline folks. And part of that's that intergenerational difference, and part of that's older folks in that camp were raised at a time when Native youth were being snatched and taken to boarding camps. A certain amount of hiding was the safest way to do things, which, some of the folks with the International Youth Council and some of the other youth that have been leading this understand, and, they love and respect their elders, but they also recognize that it is a different day, and these not so youth, these adults who are coming into leadership roles, who have listened to their elders and gone and gotten those educations and have been getting told for years they need to step up and lead. When this happened in the camp, there were folks who then came back and criticized them. There were other elders who wouldn't chastise folks in public, would openly support folks. We're not trying to take a lead role, but we're there as an elder to both support and be a resource. And so, there is a lot of issues around that, telling folks, white folks telling Lakotas to stay in a prayerful way, as if, warriors, there are warriors I know who are pipe carriers, who are chanupa carriers, who they don't carry their chanupa to the front line, but they're very prayerful, spiritual people. And for people to accuse them of not being in a prayerful way while they're going to risk their freedom and personal well-being for the future generations, for the water, for the air, for the commons like that, for all of us, to challenge those folks' spiritual intentions and spiritual practice, especially if you don't even understand their spiritual practice, is both disrespectful and the attitude of an agent moderator. That's some stuff that could be perpetrated by folks intentionally trying to upset an effective action. And
do you feel like this is an analysis which is spreading? I have seen a little bit of analysis about what you're talking about right now just being disseminated over news channels and social media and whatnot, but do you see this discussion of, for lack of a better word on my part, this discussion of a diversity of tactics being disseminated to other anti-extraction struggles?
It's hard to say. I've largely been put in North Dakota for the past several months. But a lot of folks from different struggles came through. And I can't speak for them because they saw what they saw through their own eyes. And, depending on when and where they were at those camps, they could have seen drastically different things and been told drastically different stories as to what was happening at that moment, what had happened up to that moment, and where things were going to go. But I do think folks are waking up, and I think the intersectionality of struggles that is becoming more present is what will allow this discussion of diversity of tactics to really become more to the forefront. More, I don't think it needs to be a discussion. I think it just needs to be a respect that happens.
Yeah.
And with different groups that aren't in a position to lose privilege from where they're at, have that freedom of nothing left to lose. Whereas, privileged folks, largely a lot of white folks, but, other settler colonial folks who have a better class background or have had more access to stuff, pull their punches, have a real tendency to pull their punches in these situations, or paid organizers pull their punches, is because finishing off an enemy, finishing off a campaign definitively leaves them without work, or leaves them without the control of an organization that they had. Whereas folks whose hearts are true and are really just committed to that land, that water, and that future, and getting everyone free as soon as we can now, they're going to be more willing to, not view a broken window or some damaged bulldozers as violence when they see people starving, people going hungry, people being incarcerated. Unarmed protesters, we have folks who are facing decades for lockdowns. We have this aggressive set of policing tactics that are being deployed against us that, like it or not, folks need to create that big crowd for some more direct action to happen out of so that can be done safely and non-violently, or the options that will be left will be, groups that don't come out in public and only see violence as an option and not getting caught. If non-violently praying and getting arrested can get someone 10, 20 years, it's going to push folks in that harder core direction. And it's more a question of, if we collectively can do the outreach and education, that the bulk of the dissidents in society come with us, rather than cling to law and order as the main goal of society, rather than, evolution or something like that. Living within our ecosystems means.
I think that's all extremely well said. Thanks for going into that. You mentioned the intersectionality of struggle a little while ago, and one of the last questions that I have is that this struggle has, and is struggle an appropriate word, just to go off script or whatever for this?
I mean, it definitely is a struggle. I mean, we're all tired and hurt and sore, so it's a damn struggle. Convincing folks to support, folks having to won that support through footage of them standing in prayer, getting the crap beat out of them by multi-state law enforcement. That's a struggle, man. That's a fight. For real.
Well, then this struggle has generated just a lot of momentum, it seems, at least within anarchism, around anti-extraction industries. And there was a lot of momentum prior to this, but this feels somewhat different. Also, one thing that I find really exciting is that it has generated a lot of discussion about meshing these two discussions of anti-extraction struggle with a explicit anti-colonialist discussion as well. Would you talk about whether you see this as being, something, I guess, new, and about, a bit about the importance of intertwining these two analyses?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the intersectionality starts coming to be real obvious is when it's looked at things like the current immigration raids versus the fact that Flint still isn't a priority of our federal government to get clean drinking water. Or the fact that the state of North Dakota has spent $23 million and counting on policing costs to get a pipeline put in that's going to not create much revenue or jobs or anything for that state. There's a need to kind of recognize the continual looting of this land by financial interests of various sorts. That is the base injustice. Folks who want to tweak or modify the system, I feel, are failing to appreciate the toxicity of what this American system was built on, that it is built on stolen land, that it is built with stolen hands, and much of this profit I've done a lot of work with labor and class stuff, and the temptation to be like, oh, this is a class thing, and the value of our labor is being taken from us. But even what we're laboring on is taking the value from the land of folks who were the first inhabitants here. None of that is possible. Like, a lot of anarchists and revolutionaries will fight for everyone and forget the native people. And so I think it is crucial that how we start thinking about these struggles brings into that anti-colonial, decolonizing mindset and the support and leadership of folks who are still strong in their indigeneity, to avoid tokenizing folks because, hey, you're native, we're going to put you in charge, even if you were raised Christian in a boarding home and you don't actually know much about where you come from. And so the importance of that indigeneity is those are the folks who have that understanding of living with the land and living, as part of ecosystem, and have that appreciation for the land, air, the creatures that all provide for us. And so when we talk about the pollution and damage done by these extreme extractive industries, we need to look at that damage done and that cultural genocide that's been done against folks who just want, who long, like many indigenous cultures around the world, just lived as part of the land that they were on and was thankful for that land for providing for them, as opposed to the Christian concept of dominion over the land, which is an interesting interpretation of being good stewards, is having dominion over the land. But yeah, I think that the need for those intersections, the need for Black Lives Matter, and how powerful it was to have folks like Chairman Fred Hampton Jr., come out with folks, and all the 300 plus nations that came out and showed their solidarity, and numerous white folks from any number of organizations that came and showed that solidarity, saw a lot of ways how that camp was operating in a good, humble way. There was no need for money for most of the things. If you were doing work, there were kitchens that would feed you. There was space to be had, and a lot of folks took that shit like it was Burning Man and just came and took, and were culture vultures on the whole thing, and just they're kind of fetishizing natives in resistance, or working on their photo project, or working on an art project, or wanting to come up and tell the tale. Mm-hmm. It's like, are you native? Mm-hmm. You probably shouldn't be telling that tale. Hell, you should probably help empower these native youth who are trying to tell their tales right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's some of the importance of that intersection is these recognitions that there are going to be folks who just know how to do it better because they were raised that way. Mm-hmm. It's like the damn teepees that didn't budge in the windstorms and everyone's other tents got flattened and torn apart. There's some stuff that local folks will just know. And when we're talking about these rural places and we're talking about trying to take indigenous leadership or local leadership in places, is we have to recognize that, just because you may be educated, just because you may be permaculture demigod to folks out there, or if it doesn't actually translate to that bioregion, if it doesn't translate to pragmatic things folks can do, if you're just going to come and say you should do it all this way, it's that same problem. It's not looking at the intersections. It's presenting this is the way it should be done. This is the model we have. This is how we've been doing it. We fail most of the time, but this is the model of how we do this. Yeah,
definitely. And also calls into question of really challenging people to actually fully examine why they're doing something. Are you going to Standing Rock because you want to, like you said, work on your photo project? Are you going to be updating your Instagram about it? Or are you going to actually have as real solidarity with people and with struggle as you can have?
Mm-hmm. And there's the question, there are a lot of conditional allies out there who I've seen their Facebook comments about how getting beat up or saying mean things to law enforcement doesn't keep with our message and loses us support. And I challenge anyone, if your support is so easily lost, did you ever really give it in an earnest and heartfelt way? There's some Munchis, there's some grandmas out there who just about make me cry with the support they show their youth and how proud they are of, these young folks who I've seen count coup on cops. Get to the top of that hill that there's footage of folks getting brutalized at the bottom, touch a cop, not in a harmful way, but touch them. Counting coup, showing their bravery, demystifying and showing that they could do more, but not having to. Seeing these different ways of doing things, seeing, these powerful moments of, like, the praise that folks get, knowing that these young folks are earning real prestige in their culture or by doing these things while others are, both trying to shame them while other grandmas are holding them up.
That's incredible.
A lot.
That's totally incredible and such a, like, for me, such an amazing concept or just a very inspiring thing to hear about. Those are all the questions that I had. Do you have anything else that you want to add?
Just that there ain't a region in this country that's free from pipeline expansions right now. Get trained, get rowdy, let's stop this stuff. Let's kill some black snakes.
Yeah, agreed. If anybody is in a moneyed position, do you have a suggestion on where they would send funds?
The 3 places I've long been supporting and encouraging are, the Sacred Stone Camp, which is the original camp and the camp that's taking in a lot of folks who are in the floodplains. The Water Protector Legal Collective that is working on the court cases. The Medic and Healer Council, which helps coordinate the flow of supplies and support into the medics helping. And, those are the best on-the-ground crews.
Hell yeah.
Right now that are taking care of folks.
Thank you so much, buddy. That was awesome.
Yeah, of course.
You're listening to WSFMLP 103.3 in Asheville, North Carolina. This is The Final Straw, and I'm Brissa Goodness. Archives of the show can be found at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and radio versions can be found in our collection on archive.org. Our show is free to download and syndicate. This program is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned cooperative in Asheville specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. Firestorm's partial catalog of books and zines can be found online at firestorm.coop.